Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Alchemy Sisters. You are here with Mandee and Jennie. Hey Jennie, how you doing?
Pretty good, Mandee. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm feeling really good today. We've got some extra sunlight finally and switched the clocks, and I have just like a lot of energy, and I'm feeling very grounded today and excited, which is really nice. How about you?
We got a little sunshine here, too. It's been raining in Northern California for a while, and we do need the rain, but it was nice to see that sun pop out, and yes, it gave me a little boost of energy as well.
Oh, beautiful. For those of you who are just first tuning in or those who are coming back, welcome back. We're the Alchemy Sisters, and each week we host a discussion, typically with a guest, to help kind of navigate life and offer healing energies and different modalities. And we talk about the divine, and we bring in lots of wisdom and awareness and clarity to this whole kind of spirituality thing. And each person has their own unique soul path and things that they need to get through. And we're just here to offer support and connect resources. So thank you all for joining us. And you can find us on Facebook, Facebook.com/The Alchemy Sisters, or Facebook.com/Heart Over Ego, which is our new channel, which we'll talk more about. But without further ado, I would like to welcome our guest tonight, because we finally have an astrologer, and an incredible one at that. We're going to be chatting with Jenifer Edwards. She is the founder of Thank Goddess in Maine. She's wildly talented, does a bazillion things, and we're going to talk to her all about it. So welcome, Jen. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great, you guys. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show. I'm really excited.
Oh, we're honored to have you here. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what you do and how they can get a hold of you?
Sure. I founded Thank Goddess back in the equinox of 2017, and I put together a place for women to find their soul path, to honor the goddess from within, and also to feel beautiful from the inside out, because it's all about self-care, and that's how we manifest things into our lives. I typically see astrology clients, I see energy clients. I kind of do a unique amalgamation of all of these services to kind of get people in the direction that they need to be in, that their soul is yearning to be in, and softly awaken them, because when they come to me, they've answered the call because they feel the pull. And people can find me online at www.thankgoddess.org, and I'm also on Facebook at Thank Goddess 1, and I'm on Instagram, Thank Goddess. I think it's a Thank Goddess, and then there's like a little line, Thank Line Goddess on Instagram.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. There's so many things that I want to talk to you about tonight, because not only are you an esthetician and an astrologer, you do Reiki and access bars, you're a shamanic student, you do cacao ceremonies, all kinds of stuff. Jennie usually likes to kick off our show with her special question, so I'm going to let her go ahead and ask you that, because that'll help us get into you and your work and all of your gifts.
Yes, I'm curious on so many levels. I'm curious from the standpoint of being an astrologer, and then I'm curious, about astrology. So my first question to you is going to be, what question do you get the most? As a psychic, I get block, or will you channel a dead family member? That's what I get most. But in your world, what do you get the most? What are the questions that come up the most?
Oh, everybody wants to know about their love life. They want to know about what's going to happen in their career. A lot of times when people come to me for astrology, they are trying to figure out where the chaos is coming from. And if someone who's had astrology, like if they're a first-time client, that's usually where they'll go for, is right for the relationship piece. If they're a returning client, they kind of are wanting to know about how the moon is going to influence them during the current month, because where it's placed in their chart is where it's going to bring the most energy. I always have a really good time looking at their life's purpose, because that usually happens to tie into how things are sort of playing out currently.
And would that be the midhaven? Where do you look when you look at their soul purpose?
So there's two places in the chart that I tend to take a peek at. Well, actually, there's three places. The first place is the North Node, which where the North Node lands is your purpose here in this lifetime. And directly opposite of that is the South Node, and that is where you are. Those are the lessons that you learned in your last lifetime. And so they're directly opposite of each other. So you bring those gifts here with you during this lifetime from your last lifetime, but we tend to retreat into our South Node when we don't want to do our work, because the South Node is more comfortable for us, and the North Node is, gives us the anxiety, even though we're breaking walls and we're moving forward. The second place that I look at is called the part of fortune. That's a mathematical sort of configuration. It's easier done on a computer. Nowadays, it's super easy. But basically, that shows where you're going to find your successes in life, where you'll more than likely make your money in life. And then the last one, of course, is the Black Moon Lilith, which is the shadow side of your emotions. And so, we can look at how we love through the moon sign, which is kind of romantic, but then we really need to look at the shadow side in order to look at ourselves as a whole, to see how our reactions are when like a good example would be if you have a Scorpio moon. And the Scorpios are very passionate, they're psychic, and they're all in. They're either way up or way down. There really is never an in-between unless they're older. I have a Scorpio moon. Unless they're older and they've learned how to master their emotions. But, the downside of that, especially with a younger person with a Scorpio moon is obsession and jealousy and, having things completely overtake you because you're so passionate. And so that would sort of show up in the Lilith placement in somebody's chart.
Fascinating. How long have you been studying astrology?
I've been studying astrology since 1993, so it was kind of like way before the internet started. I was always into this stuff. That's usually how it works for us energy workers. We're kind of like born talking to trees and stuff like that. But with astrology, it's, I started reading magnets and, whatever we had for material in the early 80s. And I always thought, I am a Sagittarius, but I feel like I'm so much more, and I couldn't quite figure it out. And then all of a sudden I came across, we had this old chain bookstore before Amazon or all the other places. And I used to go there and hang out, and I heard Linda Goodman, and she used to write all of these books about sun signs, moon signs. And once I started piecing that all together, it was like, yes, I knew that there was a code to the universe. And so for the longest time, I made it a game. Like, I would try to figure out what people's signs were just by looking at them and trying to get a feel for their personality, because I felt like the way to really figure out yourself is by seeing through somebody else's eyes. And so, that's how I started, like, deeply getting into it. A lot of astrologers will get into, like, the big picture astrology, what's happening in the United States or, all that stuff. And, and I could see that stuff, but I'm really more interested in the individual person's soul and how they view things and how they love things. Like, that brings me joy.
That's awesome. You just naturally segued into my favorite question. My favorite question is, when did you get into this metaphysical stuff? When did you find that this was a soul calling? And how old were you when you started reading the magazines? I think you said you were reading magazines.
Oh, my goodness. Well, this is hilarious. So what ended up happening was, and I didn't realize this till probably my early 20s, maybe actually more like my mid-20s, but we had moved to my parents had bought a home, their first home in Casco, and we had moved there. I think I was like 5, and I had memories during a meditation of being downstairs mixing potions in these little, like, leftover bottles that the old owners had left in the basement, and somebody was sort of directing me, and that's when I realized that all of the things that I was ever into as a child had to have come from somewhere else with me from a past life. When I really started reading about magazines and, like, the tarot, and just spending a ton of time trying to search that stuff out, because, we really didn't have the internet back then. You had to go to a place so you had to walk in there and own that you were reading this stuff, because back then it really wasn't all that accepted. But I think I was probably somewhere between 12 and 15. I spent a lot of time alone, and I actually, because of my interest in astrology, and I'm sure you both can relate, ended up being a therapist to my friends from like age 8 until, current day. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it always ends up with, oh, let me look at your chart. I'll see what's going on. You know what I mean? So it's a lot. It started out as being a lot of fun, and now it's something that I'm passionate in, to see people light up when they get it.
Awesome. And what year were you born?
76.
I'm
a good old 76er.
Yes, I'm 78, and I'm 78, and I feel like just a bunch of us crystal kids, like, had a plan in the non-physical, like, all right, guys, you ready? We're going to pepper out the 70s and bring in a bunch of light, and by the time we're 40, shit will be cataclysmic catastrophe, and we'll have to fix it. It's fun. It's all fun.
Oh, totally. It's funny. Can you imagine thinking back to, like, the 80s and the 90s when we were growing up, to think about how everybody's so connected now, and how really that is what's represented by Uranus. Uranus is the planet that is ruled by Aquarius, and it actually looks like a little radio transmitter when you look at the hieroglyphs of it, and how its move through the solar system has really made all of this possible. It's kind of interesting.
Interesting. And I am a little slow, so can you explain that again? Is that applying to right now, or is that applying to the 70s, the Uranus that you were discussing?
Well, since for instance, if we were to look back to when we were born, Uranus was present in Scorpio. So Uranus takes, I think it's about 10 years to go through a sign. So if it was in Scorpio when I was born, and it is currently just entered Taurus. So it's taken 40 years to move through 5 signs.
Interesting.
So basically, if you want to do like a decade for each sign, that would probably be, because there's retrogrades, but it's a very slow-moving planet. The slowest moving planet is Pluto, and that one is the planet that really is about growth and rules Scorpio. And if you think about how deep Scorpio is and how connected it is, Pluto is the god of the underworld. There's nothing surface about this planet at all. A lot of people are terrified of it, but you should never be, because growth isn't always pretty. Lotuses grow in the mud. So there's a lot of fighting for the light when Pluto goes through, but boy, when you find it, it was worth every moment.
Come here for
That's
it.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
exactly. It makes me wonder too, because I had my birth chart, and we'll talk more about birth charts in a little bit, done with Jen. But and I had a lot of Pluto, so I was like associating with all that, and I'm like, yep, it's all about growth this lifetime, and I'm excited about it. What is the effect of this asteroid? Is it Chiron? Is that how we say it? With the wounded healer?
I call it Chiron. Some people call it Chiron. I guess it's tomato, whichever way you're coming from. But so Chiron is the wounded healer. And so we all have it in our chart, and where it presents itself, it takes about 40 years to make a return. So, Jennie, we're having our return right now. And so
yeah, I was just going to say, I'm in that, I think.
Yeah, you are. It's a generational thing. So what happens is, wherever Chiron is located in your chart, in your birth chart, that is where I call it the mother wound, but I don't want people to get confused. It's not that your mother wounded you. It's like the wound of all wounds. It's the one where you wake up, you're having that dream where you're naked in front of the whole high school, but you really are. You know what I mean? Like, it's not a dream. It's like your worst nightmare. And wherever that lands in your chart happens to be where your greatest healing is going to occur on a soul level in your lifetime, because it's like your Achilles heel, it's your soft spot. And, I'll give myself as an example. I have Chiron in my 11th house, which is, an awkward place to have that as a child. I was a very outgoing kid. I was very weird in a good way. I say weird as in unique. I was into a lot of different things, stuff that was not relatable to children that were my age. I just kind of stuck out like a sore thumb. So friendships tended to be they weren't consistent, they weren't authentic. I also had a lot of issues growing up through, my teenage years into my early 20s where, I wanted to be a part of these groups and realized I had to change myself to do so and saw a lot of hurt and grief in the process. And what happens is that instead of the idea is that when you get older, I'm never going back to school again. I'm never going to feel those feelings of hurt or shame or whatever it was that made you so uncomfortable. Because when you're a child, you're so tender and you don't understand social morals. We're just light beings that just want to be loved and accepted. So when you have that kind of wound, a lot of people will just retreat and they won't deal with it. So what happens is that when we have our Chiron return, the children of the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, mid-70s till I think 80 are experiencing right now, is if you didn't fix that, then, it's going to, I'm not scaring anybody, it's just like it is with everything. It's the lesson coming back to teach us the lesson again. So in my lifetime, in my recent lifetime, I found my tribe. And I found my tribe by being my authentic being, no matter if I was the black sheep or if nobody liked me at work. I kind of just held my freak flag way up high, and I ended up finding my tribe, and I'm the happiest I've been in my life. And I feel like I'm actually right at my return right now. And so it's almost like if you stand in your truth, isn't this really the lesson for everything? But if you stand in your truth, you're rewarded. And so I'm totally rewarded in, abundance right now in love and friendship because of that.
I feel the same way. I feel like I'll be 41 in a couple weeks, and I feel like I have more abundance than all the other decades of my life put together. And this is people, connections, actual physical abundance. I'm like, ooh, the 40s are good so far. I'm digging it.
Oh, absolutely. And and this happens for everybody. Your Chiron return happens in your 40s. So, if someone's listening out there and they're 15 or they're 20, get real with yourself. Be as authentic as you are. Be who you really are, and don't be afraid because you will be rewarded. The 40s are, one of the most marvelous times because of all the blessings that come to us because of all of our lessons.
I've heard that so many times. I'm just a little younger, as our listeners know, because I'm 85, so I've got a little bit of time before my 40s. But I enjoy every second, and I get so excited, and I hear so much about that chapter coming in for different people and really merging, like their higher self often merges with their authentic self, and they just become more comfortable in who they are. And it's cool. You can really see that whether people are spiritual or not or whatever it is, you can just often see that shift or sense of maturity in a lot of people. And so that makes so much sense. Thank you, Jen. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah. You know what, sister? I'll tell you, it's great because you see, I think it's also like a cultural thing right now, too. Everybody's just starting to chill, which I'm really kind of enjoying, at least in Maine anyway.
Oh, I love it. Jennie, do you have any questions? If you don't, I do have one.
Go ahead. You ask one. Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us, Jen, a little bit about retrogrades and all of that entails.
Oh, everybody's favorite thing is Mercury retrograde, right? Run to the hills, hide under your bed, Mercury's retrograde, oh my God. So the fabulous thing about Mercury retrograde, it's kind of like the Marie Kondo of the zodiac. Like she's super popular right now, so she's a good reference point. Mercury retrograde it happens 3 times a year, sometimes 4 times a year if we're super lucky. And it's just, if Mercury appears to be going backwards in the sky. It's not. And it's actually made out of iron. So it turns into this giant magnet. And so the rule of thumb is when Mercury begins to retrograde, we don't want to start anything new. And what that looks like, and also it's kind of layered with where is it in your chart, because that will put emphasis on, where you probably, like if it's in your 4th house, probably signing papers and buying a home is not a great idea. But sometimes things can't be helped, and that's a lesson that you need to learn. So it happens anyway. But typically the rule of thumb is no new electronics, no new vehicles, don't sign any paperwork, agreements, stuff like that, because it typically has to be redone. I have spent a large part of my adult life, especially with coworkers that just, think that I'm some sort of prophet, and like whatever you do, don't get a new floor, wait until afterwards, because usually the measurements are off. It'll take a lot longer. It's really a time for us to reorganize, all the words. Reorganize, restructure, repaint. If you painted something, repaint it. It's cool. It's retrograde, And retrograde also has a shadow period on either side. You can kind of feel it before it actually happens. Communication tends to completely shut down. As you know, Mercury, many of you may not know this, Mercury is the planet of communication. It's ruled by Gemini and Virgo, which are very structural signs, and they're very communicative signs. So those signs feel it the most when Mercury goes retrograde. But I always love it because it's a great time to, go through your house and get rid of the crap you don't need. Make space for new stuff, It's not a time to run for the hills. It's a great time for reflection. Like there's another reword right there. And so we'll have retrograde now. We started retrograde on March 5th, and it'll be over on the 28th. But we kind of have a shadow period. So, if you can wait to buy that new laptop or that car, you might want to wait until like the 10th. And the shadow period is basically if a planet looks like it's going backwards, then it means it has to come forward again. So it's going back over the degrees that it went backwards over. So if you wait till the 10th, it'll be like home free, past the woods into back onto the trail kind of thing.
The 10th of April?
Yes. Yep. If
okay,
you can actually hold out to the 20th, that'd be great. But the 10th is. The 10th is good. Some people are hard and fast on the 20th, but I mean, you got to sign stuff. You know what I mean? The new moon's on the 15th. If I were to give, solid advice, I would say I'd wait till the new moon on April 15th.
Perfect.
Because you're initiating new things with the new moon, so what a perfect time.
Exactly. That's a great follow-up question. We often talk about kind of the new moon and the full moon and what those mean and activities that you can do around them. What are some things that you suggest or you like to do to your clients or that you like to do for yourself upon the new moon and the full moon?
So on the new moons, I actually love. I am a moon worshiper. I've been me and the moon. We've been tight since way back. We're OGs, but I really love to manifest with the new moon. And then I work it all the way through to the full moon. And with clients, I will see where that is in their chart and sort of like if they want to do a ritual, increase the vibration of the intention that they're making. Like a good example would be Susie has a new moon, and like this new moon coming up is 15 degrees Aries. So it was in my client's chart, it would be it'll be in her first house. So the first house represents how others see you. It's the house itself, it's how you present yourself to the world. So if you want to change your image, or then we would create an intention list for the next 6 months to execute, along with herbs and stones that vibrate in that energy to kind of help support that. So we'll do like a mandala or something like that. We'll put together some awesome thing that someone wants to work on that falls in that house. But you don't have to get that elaborate. I mean, it's all about asking. It's all about pretending like it's already happened and allowing for that to occur. Because like the planets, like us, we're all energetic beings. And so the only reason why I can see another human being is because they're vibrating. So manifestation really is just matching the vibration of the universe to allow things to go back and forth.
Yeah, Jen, I have to tell you really quickly, I don't always do this in the interviews, but I have to just tell you that you have a little guest popping in from the non-physical. We got Albert Einstein, loving your quote, lining it up with things that he said. saying that he knows you from past lives, not when he was Albert, but when he was a different entity or being or human, however you want to say it. I guess he's always been the same entity, but when he was a different being, not Albert. So it looks like you've crossed paths with him a couple times, and he just wanted to pop in and say hi.
Oh my gosh, I have goosebumps. That's really funny that you say that, because I really resonate with his train of thought. My brain is very half spiritual, half science, and I've spent a good portion of my life trying to prove the spiritual part wrong with science. And you know what? It's spiritual all the way, baby, I'll tell you.
Yes, and this is what you got. You guys were astronomers in a past life together, and it looks like you guys did dabble like in what you do this lifetime, a little more astrology. But yes, you've definitely played with him in the science and the spirit realms. He's just coming in, giving you a little soul hug. Glad to see you doing your work. Just wants you to know he's proud of you.
Oh, thank you so much. That makes my heart feel so good.
Good. Makes him happy too.
Oh. That was very cool. And that's the thing. I talk about that all the time. We're really at this beautiful stage where science and spirituality are merging. Well, they've always merged. It's more of our awareness of it and the capacity and what we can do. And it's just like such an exciting time to live and have incarnated right now. And there's so many things that we kind of intuitively know as kind of healers or people who have been doing this work or walking this path. We're like, okay, yep, we just got to wait for science to catch up with this, and then they'll prove that, and it'll be great. And I love that, Jen, that you've just held some space with trying to disprove certain things and really been there and looked at it from all angles. I honor it. And it's so incredibly important right now, and important for your work and everyone's work. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you. Well, one of the things that always gets someone that's not really quite 100% listening to what we're talking about, and they're super science people, is when you start breaking down the molecule and you start breaking down the nucleus. You know, everything's comprised of atoms, but what is the center of that atom, right? It's the God molecule. No one can figure it out. So, that's where I always, my dad's spiritual, but he's science Johnny guy, and usually we'll go back and forth at Thanksgiving, and then I'll bring up the God molecule, and everybody gets quiet. Because there it is, there it is. It's love. I believe the God molecule is love, right?
Yeah, love. Mm-hmm.
Agreed. Absolutely. Yeah. I always think of it as like we talk about like energy and whatnot, and we've mentioned before we had a guest on, Elizabeth Wood, who's a sex educator, and she just made this like beautiful, realization to all of us, like, we're literally born from an orgasm, and we literally have to come via like an ecstatic portal to get here and be on that vibration and stuff. And so when you really break it down to it, it really encompasses that love feeling, and it makes so much sense of that's what a lot of the like empty space or whatnot would be made of. And it's the hardest thing at the same time. And so I'm so excited for all of the awareness that's coming around that right now, and all of the science that's coming to really show what these frequencies look like. And I love all the little kids doing experiments with the Wi-Fi and with the water that you're yelling at and the plants that you're yelling at and what that looks like as technology is growing. It's absolutely fascinating and beautiful.
I totally agree with that, 100%.
And I like that you have a science mind. It's refreshing. I also dabble. I like science. I like spirituality. I lean more into the spiritual space, but I absolutely love research and science, and for the sake of learning and growing in that aspect as well. But I feel like it's respectable when you are working in a field such as spirituality, and you've done work to disarm it or debunk it, and you can't. I think that I've done that. I'm kind of, I'm kind of a skeptic for psychics, and I am a professional psychic. So I've gone through the years with kind of discerning what frequency I like in the psychic realm, and it often is the people that have that duality that you have, which is spirit and science. It's a wonderful place to stand. If it were a tarot card, it'd be the Tempress, one in the water, one on the ground. I like it.
Yes, and I resonate with the Tempress quite a bit because, that's a Sagittarius card. And I feel like, if and you guys, I believe the three of us agree that, in order for us to be able to stand in our truth, we have to truly believe in what we're doing. And in order to do that, we have to do it on ourselves, and we have to see the fruits of our labor within ourselves and see the growth. and that's when we can start awakening.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
And Jen,
no doubt about
Jen,
it.
Can you tell our listeners, because some people can kind of only listen to some of the show, they tune in and have to leave and what have you. Can you tell everyone how to get a hold of you again? I think
sure.
we're in need of good astrologers, and I want people to get your information.
Oh, thank you. No, I can be reached very easily on www.thankgoddess.org. I do over online Zoom readings. If you're near Portland, Maine, and you want to come and see me, you can come and see me for something. It's called the Soul Reveal at 22, which is at my space. But for those of you that are all over the world, I also offer something called Soul Reveal at Virtual, and all of my astrology work is online. So it's very easy for me to just log on and say hi and show you your chart. You can book all of that stuff on my website. I can also be reached at Facebook, which is at ThankGoddess1. And then I can also be reached on Instagram, which is at It's at Thank and then _Goddess.
Beautiful. That's awesome. And then if you're just tuning in with us, or if you're getting ready to leave the show or whatever, we are the Alchemy Sisters. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/the Alchemy Sisters. Same with Heart Over the Ego, which is our new project. It's going to be Alchemy Sisters /Heart Over Ego. And you can email us at alchemyascensionacademy@gmail.com or heartoverego@gmail.com. Oh, Jen, this has been such a wonderful conversation so far. You are a wealth of knowledge and wisdom. We're honored to have you.
I'm honored to be present.
Oh, I was just going to say, is there anything bubbling up that you want to focus on or share with our listeners at this moment? And we certainly have more questions, but I kind of wanted to see where you were at.
No, I'd love to have more questions. I always like to have things come from other people because it's always more. For me, it gets me out of my own headspace. So it's great. I'm a very 12th house person. You'd have to say.
Perfect then. Okay, so I have two questions that I do want to get to. One is talking about planets assigned to houses, and then the other one's talking about what. And this might kind of come together, I'm not sure, but what people should be, if they're looking at just a generic horoscope, what they should be looking for their sign, because they're often misdirected with that. And this might be one thing and kind of separate, but you are the expert, so you would know.
So that's a wonderful question. And actually, this took me a very long time to figure out. And like I said, when I found Linda Goodman, I kind of pieced all this stuff together. A lot of times people will be turned off from astrology because they'll pick up the newspaper and then, they'll read their sun sign, which is the sign the sign of the day that you were born. And it doesn't make any sense, and you always hear the old adage that I read my horoscope and it's never right. Well, the reason why, and there's two different schools of thought on this, and I just found this out recently that there's a big astrologer that does not agree with me, and I'm not sure why. Because, in the mathematical science piece, it doesn't make sense. So I'm going to tell you how I read things, and I'm going to tell you how it makes sense to me, and maybe there's another way to look at it that I haven't seen yet. But the way that I have learned how to do astrology is to, by the time that you're born is your rising sign. So we have three signs that comprise your birth chart that are imperative to sort of your social makeup and your intuitive makeup and your emotional makeup. And it's the day that you're born, it's and the time that you're born. And the place is also important too because it figures out the time zone. And so once we figure out where your rising sign is, which is the sign that is at the horizon at the time of your birth, then we're able to negotiate what your first house is. So for people who have never had their birth chart done, without this getting too overwhelming, a birth chart is a big wheel. It looks like the Wheel of Fortune. And it has, we might as well just call it the Wheel of Fortune, right? And it has 12 houses. It starts with 1, and it goes all the way around to 12. Each house means something different. And there are 12 astrological signs. And there is absolutely no coincidence that they all fit in the same place. So it starts with Aries in the first house and goes all the way to the 12th house. Each house has its own sort of representative sign associated with it. Now, when you look at your birth chart and the time that you were born, you could have a Virgo rising, which would make your first house be Virgo, but you could have a Sagittarius birthday. Your birthday's in December. So if you are reading a Sagittarius horoscope, it's telling you that the sun is going to be in a completely different place in your chart than where it's supposed to be in the first house. So I tell people to read Virgo. If their rising sign is Virgo, read your rising sign, because all horoscopes are written as if your sun sign is the same as your rising sign, and that doesn't happen that often. It's not a unicorn, but it definitely doesn't happen that often. So, for instance, using my own chart as an example, I'm a Sagittarius. I have a Cancer rising. So if I read Cancer and it's July and they're talking about the sun is in my first house. If I were to read Sagittarius, it would tell me that the sun was in my 8th house, and that's not correct. So the 8th house is, windfalls, money, all that jazz. And the first house, as we talked about before, is more about the self and how we present ourselves to the world. So if you've ever thought that your horoscope didn't quite mesh with what was going on in your life, that chances are good that your rising sign is not the same as your sun sign.
Fascinating. I'm an Aries with a Cancer rising, and people often tell me, oh, you're not your typical Aries, you're not your typical Aries. And I'm like, I act more like a Cancer, and then so now I'm going to start reading my Cancer horoscope. I've always just read Aries, and it didn't resonate always.
Oh, for sure. And actually, it's kind of interesting, too, to look a little bit deeper at the rising signs, is that, sometimes you can tell what people's rising signs are by how they present themselves to the world, because you look like the sign that's in your first house. You look like the sign that your ascendant lands in. So, people with Cancer rising, they end up being very motherly, and they end up being intuitive, and they have faces that look like the moon, and they have eyes that look like the moon. You can always sort of tell when you're dealing with a Cancer rising. And it's funny because you have a fire sun. And so do I. It kind of mellows that out, which is good, because, you always think of Aries being like impulsive and all over the place. And it actually, they work well together.
So interesting. And what's your moon sign, if you don't mind telling us?
Scorpio. So I'm Scorpio. I'm 2 waters and a fire. So my waters kind of mellow out my fire. And but I'm lucky enough to have my fire sign in such a philosophical place. As you know, there's the elements of the sign. So Aries would be the first fire sign, Leo would be the second one, and then Sagittarius is the last one. And they all go in order like that, with the water and air and earth. And so the first one to show up is Aries would be like impulsive, like if you first lit a flame, the flame jumps around. That would be like Aries, right? And then Leo is the second in line, so it's kind of, Leo's a little bit older, right? It's like it's like the middle brother, and so the fire it's getting like Aries is about, Leo is about like pride and wearing things on their chest, and so the fire is getting like a little bit bigger, maybe a little bit bolder. And then by the time it gets to Sagittarius, it's eaten half the log and it's reading the story. Do you know what I mean? Like it's found its kind of like part in the late ending of the whole fireplace, So each sign is sort of like that. So I'm kind of happy to have that there because when you have water is really emotional, and so when you have another sign to sort of even that out, it kind of doesn't make you over emotional, but it also doesn't make you over fiery too. So it's kind of like a good balance.
Yeah, I have a Capricorn moon. I think it mellows out my emotion space. I'm very emotional, but I'm pretty rational with it.
Oh, definitely. What's your sun and rising? Do you know?
Aries, Sun, and Cancer rising.
Oh, wow. So you and Mandee are, like, pretty close.
Oh, no, Mandee, what are you? That was me earlier. So it might be hard to differentiate our voice.
I'm a Sag Sun, Cancer Moon, Taurus rising.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You guys are so powerful. You guys are getting stuff done. That's all I'm going to say. You guys are getting things accomplished. And so the Cancer rising, the eclipses are this year. Well, we have eclipses every year. Eclipses are huge, which may be something you might want to talk about a little bit later. But, we're going to – Cancers and Capricorns, if you have that for a rising sign or that's where your sun sign is, that's where you're going to see the most movement this year is where those signs are located in your chart for sure.
So I'm a Cancer moon, so what does that mean?
What's that?
So if I'm a Cancer moon, so what does that mean for all the eclipses? Does that mean anything?
Oh, yeah. Well, it also depends on where your moon sign lands. But the Cancer moon, you're ruled. So Cancer's ruled by the moon. So to have your moon there, like you probably have pretty changeable emotions. So
yeah.
It's probably good for you to not respond and like sit on it for a couple of days. I'm raising my hand as the Cancer rising. Like I definitely know what that's like. But you also have
I'm a big practice the pause kind of person.
Yep, exactly. But you also have a wicked sense of humor, which ties in with that Sag energy amazingly well. So, and then you have this Taurus rising that's beautiful because I always think of like, here's a good example, Larry David. Okay, Larry David has the best dry sense of humor if you're into that kind of humor, which I am. He happens to be a Cancer. So if you take Larry David, who's a Cancer, and you have like a Taurus rising or like your Capricorn moon, like that is like the perfect mixture of, Seinfeld humor. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a deep love for the off-color bits. You know what I mean?
That's yes.
Love it. Oh. Very cool. Well, speaking of eclipses, tell us more about eclipses and why they are so powerful and important.
Well, so eclipses, and actually when people start to get into astrology, myself included, and you start to realize how transformative they are, you kind of start going back in time through deductive reasoning to think about things that have happened in your life, and sure enough, it's during a major, cadent house eclipse. So eclipses happen every year. It's not the end of the world when they happen. They usually happen between 5 and 6 times a year, and they happen in an axis. So that's an AXIS. And what that means is every sign has a sign that's opposite to it. So Cancer, 6 months from Cancer is Capricorn. So they're buddies. And Sagittarius and Gemini are buddies. And Aquarius and Leo are buddies. So it works like that. So when we have eclipses, they run with their buddies. So we're having the eclipses in Cancer Capricorn right now, so I will use them for an example so I don't make any confusion. But so if we are having eclipses in the 2 signs that are 6 months apart, then you are going to find them in the months of those signs. And they usually stay in the same sign for about 3 years, and they go in order. So the next set of eclipses that will start to appear in 2020, the end of 2020, as one sign is leaving, another sign is coming in. It's like a turning of the wheel. It'll gently move to Sagittarius, Gemini, as Cancer Capricorn phases out over 2020, 2021. So now we are fully in. We said goodbye to Leo and Aquarius in January. We had the last eclipse of that cycle that started in February of 2017. We had the last eclipse of that cycle. Eclipses are so strong that they run in 6-month patterns. So you can feel eclipses up to 6 months ahead of time, especially if you have Cancer or major Cancer energy, because we are ruled by the moon. Like you can pick up on that stuff really, really hardcore as we're getting closer to eclipses. But the water signs tend to feel it a lot easier because they're so fluid. The eclipses are going to be for the next year or so. They'll be in late December, in January. So whenever the sign Capricorn is present, and then they will also occur again in late June and July when Cancer is present. We started with the eclipses this year in January, and we had the solar eclipse in January. It was 15 degrees Capricorn. I'm sure everybody felt that. Whenever we have a new moon eclipse, it's called a solar eclipse, and that's because the moon and the sun are crossing. And when we have a full moon at the end of the month or a lunar eclipse, it's because they're opposing each other. So it's in the opposite sign. So when we have a solar eclipse, that's a good time for beginnings. It's very masculine energy, so initiating stuff, that is a good time to do that. And it's also a great time to do manifestation work. And things if you have a Cancer rising, it's in your 1st and 7th house. First house is house of self, how you see yourself in the world, how people view you in your world, and your place in the world, your place in relationships. And on the opposite side of that, what Capricorn would be the 7th house, which is your house of serious relationships. So it would be like marriage, business partnerships, anything that requires a signature, and it's a long-term sort of commitment. So you would see movement in there. Now, for other people, depending on your rising sign, it will show up in different houses, and that's where you're going to see the movement. Lunar eclipses are feminine energy, and usually, you can read it in a couple different ways. So full moons are endings, right? But they're also the culmination of a manifestation cycle because it's the biggest that the moon is. It was on a waxing cycle. When you hit a new moon, it's going from dark balsamic, which is letting go, shedding, releasing. And then as soon as the moon is new, boom, we're in an ignition cycle, like the small flame is starting to emerge again. And then we get into this big waxing phase. So the energy becomes more full and voluminous and ripe for manifesting. So even though lunar eclipses are sort of endings and full moons are sort of endings, if you use the waxing side of it, it's about creating, and it's about creating during that piece. If we have a solar eclipse in January in Capricorn that we did, we had it on the 5th, then 6 months later we'll have its partner, the lunar eclipse in Capricorn. You see, so they talk to each other. So if you initiate something on January 5th, you're going to see the answer to that in July. So every solar eclipse has there's a beginning for a solar eclipse. There's an ending 6 months later. So you start to see the fruits of your labor. It's and sometimes it's instant. You know what I mean? Like I know a lot of people that during this last eclipse cycle that we had in January, the Leo Aquarius eclipses the last one was on January 26th. And, thinking back to what was going on in 2017 when those started, you have your corresponding moons that talk to each other in the beginning and the ending, but then you have like the one that sort of is like the answer to the very first one that you had back in 2017, like, where am I now after all of this? And so, a lot of people, you have lessons to learn every time we have these eclipses. And actually, a very interesting point, and this is where the science comes in, and I absolutely love this stuff, is that no matter where you are in space and time, whether it's, 10 years down the road or you're thinking back to 15 years ago, whenever we have an eclipse, you always want to look back to what was going on 19 years ago because, interestingly enough, 19 years ago, the moon was in the same place. All the planets are in different places, so you're not going to get this, something tragic happened, you're not going to have the same thing, but the lunar nodes are in the same place. So what I like to tell people is that it's the return of the lesson that was happening back then. And sometimes it takes a while to really go deep as to what was going on because people tend to think on the surface, like I was in high school and nothing was really going on. But a lot of times it's self-worth stuff and repeating cycles of self-worth that really start to pop up. So if you wanted to do the internal digging about, the 19 years ago, you really want to start to focus on Y2K, which would be when we turned over to the year 2000. That's when the January eclipses would have repeated the nodes, and then moving forward this summer into July of 2000. You're really going to start to see the undertones of what was going on. Like the same guy will show up with a different face if you didn't learn your lesson. It's all about repeating lessons until you learn them, because that's what life is all about, right? It's evolving. And so eclipses are forcing energy at us that we refuse to look at because it's uncomfortable. And either we do it or it moves it for us. It's like we're either full of resistance or we're open to the flow, right?
Exactly.
So, depending on where those land in your chart, it would really, everybody's an individual, and so is your chart. Your chart is like it's a snapshot of the sky when you exited your mother's womb. It's your astrological fingerprint. You could have best friends that have the same birthday to you the same exact day. You guys are born the same day. But one of you was born at 9 in the morning and the other was born at 1 in the afternoon, and you're totally different. Like, you'll have the same moon sign more than likely, but the rising sign moves all the planets to a different place of focus in the chart. So that's why people aren't exactly the same.
Yeah, I often
sense.
try to. I don't have a ton of astrology knowledge, but I often hear people say, well, he's a so-and-so, Leo or whatever they'll say, and, I just can't deal with Leos. And I'm like, well, that's ridiculous, because every Leo is going to be different depending on what their rising and their moon and where all their other planets or signs land. And they're like, oh. And I'm like, because I think people just instantly think astrology is the sun sign, and that's going to describe them through and through. And then I tell them there's all these other aspects, and then it's way more intricate than that. I'm sure you get that a lot in your work.
Oh, I would probably say about 87% of the time. people are fixated on their sun sign. But, it's so funny because, it really is a blend, and not only is it just a blend of the three signs, your rising and your sun sign and your moon sign, but it's also where's your Mars, where's your Venus, not only what sign is it in, but what house is it in. Like that really plays a huge part. And then in looking at it a little bit deeper, I think a lot of people get exasperated. If you got one sign to deal with, they're cool, but you start adding more stuff on, they're like, oh my goodness. But it really, yeah, totally. But it's not. It's almost like, it's like that a Christmas story. It's like nothing moves around in the sky willy nilly. Everything goes at its own pace, and you can find it through deductive reasoning. So it's not like there's a place for everything, and it goes in its own sort of like state. But there are a lot of like soulmate points that happen in a composite chart that are really important. And so like someone who is a Leo and they're with a Libra, which typically we'd never think that if you're looking at sun signs. Or Leos and Virgos, or Leos and Scorpios, like a lot of people would not put those two together, but, the Mars placement and the Venus placement could mean a soulmate connection, and you would dismiss them because they're a Leo. That would be sad.
Yeah.
People do that, though, all the time. I was just giggling. I just hear people say that. I can never date a Leo.
Oh, yeah.
I can never date a Aries.
Oh, they totally do it all the time. But I'm like, you know what? They're probably the best sex you ever had.
Let's get to the important things, people.
Try it.
Which sign were you guys talking about? Leo?
Yeah, Leo's always a good one to sort of bring up, because they're like a partridge that's sort of like puffed up on a stone wall, getting the sun and doing their little strut. My dad's a Leo, so I can say that. I love Leos. Love to all the Leos out there. I absolutely love them. But
I always hear if you want to get in a Leo's good grace. I always hear that, yeah, if you want to get in their good grace, you're supposed to compliment them or like boost their ego a little bit.
Absolutely.
Feed their ego.
That's exactly it. But but it's only because they can't feed their own ego. That's why. Like if you start looking at different signs and what their strengths are, there's a shadow side of what the weaknesses are. And so, that's part of the whole makeup. That's the nuance of that. There's good traits and not so great traits to every sign. So it's it's not just one particular sign over another. And if there were all good signs and a couple of bad signs, then no one would ever learn anything.
Exactly. What's the point of this whole game? What were you going to say, Jennie?
I've heard this. I was going to run this across Jen and see if there's truth to it. I've heard from somebody that when a person is dating somebody, they will want to know their moon sign right away because they want to know what they're getting themselves into. Is there truth in that? Is there a certain sign that a potential lover you might want to look into, a particular aspect of their chart when you're wanting to date them?
Yes, but so it gets tricky. So yes, you can do that, and that's kind of, I call that sort of like fast food astrology. I mean, because everybody again has good attributes, and then there are the shadow sides to that, especially with the moon signs. So if someone has a moon sign in Aquarius, if someone would say, they'd look at it and be like, ooh, they're like a cool lover that doesn't want to be committed and is probably not going to call me or text me and just be completely separate in this relationship. I don't want that. But on the positive side, you could have someone who's totally unique and daring and wants to try different ways to make you feel outside of the box. Or, for instance, I like to pick on Scorpio moons because I have one, and I've been through every emotional roller coaster that this ride and this incarnation has put me through. But if someone saw my moon sign, they'd be like, "Oh my God, she's because it's in Scorpio and it's in the 5th house and it's really close to Uranus and it's really close to Pluto when I was born, which means that the good side is that I'm a lover for life, and I'm very I'm not surface with my lovers. Like I have to know them inside and out because I love that. There's nothing surface about me. But the bad side can be, if you're not involved with your moon sign, could be jealousy or stalking or like looking at somebody's Facebook profile 1,000 times. There's positive things to moon signs, and then there's negative things, but it does that with every sign. Whether or not you're compatible really is a culmination of different things. You could, if you want to do like a baseline, you could do the sun and the moon, which would go by. To find somebody's moon sign, it takes the moon about 2.5 days to be in the sign to change signs, sometimes 3 days. And if you catch it right, if it's not changing signs in that day, then you don't need to know the time they were born in order to find that information out. But you won't know what house it's in. And the house that the moon is in is just as important as the sign.
Good to know.
Because the moon, the moon in the sign that it's in is how it expresses it. It's how it expresses itself. But in the house that it's in, it's another further expression of it. So it's like if you were a Capricorn moon, that's the nature of the feeling. But then if it's in the 7th house, it's the expression of it. So to have a Capricorn moon in the 7th house means that you're solid in your relationships. You don't give your heart over easy, but when you do, you're there for life. And if it was in the 8th house, you would be attracted to monetary things rather than, because 8th house is other people's money. It's sex, death, and taxes. It's a very weird house to have Capricorn in, but it happens. But it's the sign of sort of like constriction. You know what I mean? Capricorns are very they're wonderful. I love Capricorns, but they're also known for being doubting Thomases. So if you look at Saturn,
yes.
Saturn is Saturn like owns Capricorn, so you think of like restriction. And so to have that in the 8th house is the house of Scorpio, which is sex, death, taxes, other people's money, inheritances, windfalls, lottery, stuff like that. So if your moon sign was there, that's where the interest would be, you see. So it changes from each sign. So even though it's Capricorn, when you change it to a different house, it takes on a whole other nuance.
Gosh, we need to have Jen
Very
back
cool.
because we could have like 9 shows in a row with her.
I
know. How you doing?
I'm so happy you guys called me to see if I wanted to chat because, this is, I love this stuff.
You're so good at it, and
too.
it's so wonderful.
Absolutely. I hate to end the show. I want to keep talking to Jen, but I want her to get her information out. We can talk for a few more minutes, but I want her to get her information out one more time so anyone listening who may want to schedule with her can do that and get their charts read and get more detailed information.
Sure. If anybody wants to find me, you can find me the easiest online on my website, which is www.thankgoddess.org, O-R-G. And I do all of my astrology readings online. So if you're not in Maine, you can definitely go on and find any of my services for online. I have it separated. And you can also find me on Facebook at ThankGoddess1, and you can find me on Instagram at _goddess, and you can find all of my events. If you're local, I do a lot of goddess circles, and I do a lot of women's empowerment stuff, and it's all about vibrational stuff. And so, if you wanted to sit down and look at your chart and see what's going on, and maybe, get things in a good place where you're bringing in what you truly want, that's what I love to do, is really empower women and men to figure out, what truly makes them happy in this lifetime.
We love it. Yes, Mandee had a reading from you, and she's like, oh, my God, it's phenomenal. She sent me over the link so I could have a listen. I haven't had a chance. And I got my birth certificate just recently, and I am going to call and schedule with you as well. I was trying to schedule a couple weeks ago, but I wanted to make sure I got my exact time of birth. I thought I knew, but I was a couple minutes off, so I wanted to get the exact time. And I'm going to be scheduling with you, too, and I'm so excited to take a deeper look and to learn more. We appreciate you for coming. We want to have you back again. Hell, we want to give you your own show on our network if you're interested. We love your information, your wealth of knowledge, and I can see your past lives are so full of wisdom and knowledge as well, and you're just bringing that through again, and we appreciate you. Mandee, do you have anything you want to say before we close out?
I don't. I just want to thank Jen for coming on and for filling us with so much. And anytime you want to come back, we are happy to have you. I want to thank our listeners. I want to invite them to check out our new page, Heart Over Ego, which will be coming with a website soon. We do have alchemyascensionacademy.com still for readings with Jennie and I, or you can find us on Facebook /The Alchemy Sisters. Just such an honor to hold space with both of you. And I could keep going. I have so many questions, and it's absolutely wonderful. So thank you.
Oh, thank you guys for having me and holding the space. This has been truly one of the best times with sisterhood. Thank you so much for having this platform for women to listen to, for everybody to listen to. This is amazing. You guys are doing something truly special.
Oh, we thank you. And for everyone listening, I want everyone to know that we're here every Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And again, you can find us on Facebook, The Alchemy Sisters, and you can email us at Alchemy Ascension Academy. And do we have an email at Heart Over Ego, Mandee?
We do, heartoverego@gmail.com.
Which is our new mantra, and we're getting everyone involved, getting everyone interested in the alchemization of ego into heart and how it will ripple out into the universe and help change the dynamics of our planet. Again, we appreciate everyone for showing up. Join us next Monday, 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time and 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely evening.
All the love and light. Good night.
Good night.